And we are back.
Reporting.
Reporting. Wait, what am I doing?
Vehicle reporting.
Take
Affirmative.
that guy out.
Waiting affirmative.
Alright,
Acknowledge.
well, time to go explore with the subs.
Acknowledge. Acknowledge.
Alright, General. You must build a naval base of your own with submarines.
Building.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Everybody should know what I was referencing there.
Waiting order.
Alright, just come down here.
Affirmative.
And let's get the
Building.
transports.
Primary building selected. Unit
Comrade,
ready.
affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Comrade, acknowledged. Yes, sir.
Unit
Acknowledged.
ready.
Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Awaiting orders. Comrade. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Waiting order.
Do-do-do.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Awaiting orders. Affirmative. Reporting. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Reporting. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Vehicle reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
And nothing in particular
Yes, sir.
there, so let's load these guys
Affirmative.
back up and take them back to base. Probably they figure out who the hell's going in.
Awaiting orders. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Alright, over here we go.
Affirmative. 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 Reporting.
Oh nice, they automatically do it. That's awesome.
Reporting.
Alright, so there's nothing really to get all excited about over there.
Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative.
Oh hey, look what I found.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative.
Okay, nothing there, so we
Affirmative.
pretty much on the sea now. Which is awesome. Okay, so I got our economy kind of reboosted
Vehicle
up.
reporting. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Yes, sir.
Alright, well I haven't seen those guys flying there in a bit.
Building. Unit ready. Building.
Waiting order. Acknowledge. Affirmative.
Select target. Construction complete.
I see your little gap generator.
Primary building selected. Unit ready.
Need more heavy
Building.
tanks.
Yes, sir. Acknowledge. Awaiting orders. Affirmative.
Unit ready. Building.
Reporting. Acknowledge.
Unit ready. Building.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Unit ready.
Yes,
Building.
sir.
And
Acknowledged.
over there you go.
Unit ready.
Yes,
Building.
sir. Acknowledge.
Alright, well, I'm gonna save
Unit
here.
ready.
Vodka can use more vodka.
Mission saved.
Bing.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Spy
Alright,
planes
Affirmative.
ready.
up north we go.
Acknowledged.
Select target.
And there's nothing really there.
Select target.
Wait for all the tanks to gather up, and we'll be on our way. That was weak.
Vehicle reporting. Yes, affirmative. Sir. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. At once. Very well. Very well. Of course. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. 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 Yes, sir. At once. At once. Yes, sir.
Unit lost.
Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Oh, nice.
Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge.
Oops. Didn't mean to do that. I meant to blow them up, but oh well.
Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative.
Takes care of the main base.
Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative.
And then I gotta take out that little area down there.
Acknowledge. Affirmative.
That's gonna be a barrel of fun
Acknowledge.
getting to.
Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Acknowledge.
Oh, jeez.
Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Reporting. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Ooh, wow.
Affirmative. Affirmative.
Lots of power plants up there.
Acknowledge.
Select target.
Vehicle report. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged.
I'll deal with that in a minute.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Waiting order. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Alright.
Affirmative.
Gonna test out the water.
Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Unit
Acknowledged.
lost.
Oh geez, this might be rough.
Reporting. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge.
Unit lost.
Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledge. At
Unit
once.
lost.
Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative.
Oh, come on.
Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge.
Oh
Acknowledge.
geez.
Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Reporting. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative.
Alright then, so that just leaves these power plants up here.
Affirmative. Awaiting for acknowledge.
Select target. Reinforcements have arrived.
Ready and waiting.
Unit lost. Unit lost.
Yeah, there would be another one.
Comrade, affirmative.
Unit lost.
Affirmative.
Unit lost.
Oh well, V2 rocket time. Oh, and I even got those left over. So yeah,
Unit ready.
V2 rocket time.
Building. Unit ready. Building. Unable to comply. Building in progress. Unit ready. Unit ready. Building. Unit
Vehicle
ready.
reporting. Awaiting for acknowledge.
And up here we go.
Acknowledge. Reporting. Acknowledge. Affirmative. 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 Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative.
Oh,
Acknowledge. Acknowledge.
actually, I think I'm going to capture that again so I can get that
Training.
GPS deal. So I can sell that and that.
Structure sold. Unable to comply. Building in progress. Unit ready. Unit ready. Training. Unit ready.
Engineering. Affirmative.
Training.
Make one more just for the shits and giggles of it.
Unit ready.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Okay.
Waiting order. Reporting. Acknowledge. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. 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 Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledge. Awaiting for affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Reporting. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. 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 Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Vehicle acknowledged. Acknowledged. Vehicle affirmative. Waiting order. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Awaiting orders. Yes, sir. Affirmative. 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 Affirmative.
Ha!
Engineering. Affirmative. Affirmative. Engineering.
Alright, capture that.
Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Engineering. Affirmative.
Mission accomplished.
Alright, we won. Oh, I didn't beat it. Not because my economy was shit. Still, I know I killed a fuck ton of their guys. 582. $101 buildings. Wow. CS. Alright then, folks.
Amazing, these English, how quickly they adapt. They must truly have been crying out for our victory. They have abandoned their old rulers faster than rats leaving a sinking ship. We have done what no one else has dared. The Soviet Union stretches across the entire continent. We have liberated Europe at last. It's time to celebrate. See? But why not? When in Rome. Excellent. General, you have covered yourself in great honor. I will see to it personally that you are very well taken care of. Nadia, this tea is truly excellent.
Thank you. I prepared it myself.
Famous last words. And dry hump the table time.
Poison. You bitch.
Bastard pig! You will never touch me with your filthy hands again.
Headshot. Monster kill.
Well, General, this temporary chaos in Europe will only help to fuel the Brotherhood's cause.
What the tweets?
For centuries we have waited to emerge from the shadows, and now we will make ourselves known. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and took up residence in the land of Nod. You have done well to serve us, and for that, you should be rewarded. We estimate that the Brotherhood will tire of the USSR in the early 1990s. Until then, you will keep the peace. Fight our battles where you must, and you'll remain our loyal and obedient servant. For the foreseeable future.
Okay, you badass.
The foreseeable future. Comrade Chairman, I am the future.
Alright, so that was a little bit messier than I thought it was going to be, but hey, I hope you like the ending that I set up for you guys with the two songs. You could hear the one that was originally supposed to be there in the background, but I threw in the two ones. The two that I threw in was the ending. If you had the PlayStation version, that song would play at the end, and then the second one was the victory song from Red Alert 3, which, hey, it may not be my favorite Red Alert, but it does have one of the most badass soundtracks that I think any game has ever had as far as Command & Conquer is concerned. Anyway, folks, that was the Soviet campaign, and I gotta tell you, the guy that played Stalin just fucking nailed it. Like, just perfectly nailed it. I don't think there will ever be another guy that played Stalin that does it as well as him. I mean, this guy, I mean, you know, this is like a B-movie plotline, but that guy just nails it as Stalin. That is exactly how I would picture Stalin if, you know, he were in a game. And then, of course, you gotta give credit where credit is due. What's his name? Joseph Kunkin fucking nailed it as Kane as always. Just, you know, he doesn't even say but like 3 lines, but he's still one of the most badass characters in this game just because of that last segment. That last line that he says, just, you know, it's like, oh, fangasm, because, hey, everybody that loves Command & Conquer loves Kane. He may be the villain, but everybody was rooting for him. You know, GDI's the good guys, Nod's the bad guys, but more times than not, people root for Kane, even though he's, you know, an evil killer that sees himself as, like, you know, the epitome of God, even though he kind of, sort of was. Even though Command & Conquer fucking 4 destroyed his character and made him into an alien, oh my god, that was terrible. Absolutely terrible. But hey, like I said, for me, the Tiberian campaign, or the Tiberian series ended with Tiberian Sun. That was the end of it. Yes, it was like a cliffhanger ending with the expansion packs, but still, that was the ending. I don't care what anybody says. Command & Conquer's 3 and 4, they didn't happen. They are offshots. They are what-if scenarios to me. So, I know how some of you treat your Resident Evil series, you know. Code Veronica, that was the end of it. 4, 5, and 6, they didn't happen. And that's how I am with the new Command & Conquers. To me, those are just games that are spin-offs. They just, oh, hey, what if this happened? Or, hey, maybe this will happen in the future. But anyway, folks, it's kind of weird to note that Tiberian Sun was the first one I started doing as far as the Command & Conquer's going, as far as my Let's Plays go, in fact. Yeah, here we are about to do a full circle and come right back to Tiberian Sun. Because that, I believe, is the next, that's the only Command & Conquer left I need to do, really, that, out of the old ones. Unless I do Renegade, which I doubt I'll do, because I honestly didn't give 2 shits for Renegade. It wasn't a bad game, but I just couldn't get into it at all. So, I mean, if it happens, okay, maybe it'll happen, but honestly, don't get your hopes up for it. If you really like the game, hey, that's totally you, but me, no, not really. But, hey, if the demand for it gets high enough, I might do it, but I can't promise. I cannot promise that I will do it. In terms of missions, though, I would say I pretty much prefer the Soviet campaign to the Allied one, just because the Soviets only had one of those little infiltrate a building, although that second to last mission bug was really irritating. But anyway, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this Let's Play. I hope you enjoyed Red Alert, both the Allied and Soviet campaign. I will not be doing the expansion pack. I might do a couple of custom maps. I might do one to showcase the Soviet units that were added and one to show the Allied units that were used. But otherwise, don't get your hopes up for me doing Retaliation, because there was no real storyline to it. It was just shit was happening and that was the end of it. It was more to expand upon the gameplay than to actually set up a new story altogether. Although it does introduce General Carville, so it does do that. General Carville is introduced, but the other one, I forget his name, the Soviet general, he doesn't carry on into any of the later games. But, yeah, this has been Command & Conquer Red Alert, and I've been Luca Blight, also known as the Trash Cat, the Somm. So, see you all soon for whatever Let's Play I decide to take on next.